Hey guys, it's Pineapple, and in this video, we're going to be talking about Jujutsu Kaisen, the new anime that just recently started on Crunchyroll, coming straight out of the weekly Shonen Jump frying pan. I've done a video discussing the basics and who the main characters are, and I've also done a video explaining the first part of the manga's prequel story featuring Yuta. But today we're going to be talking about just how far I think the Jujutsu Kaisen anime is going to get into the manga material in the first season of the anime. This is going to end up being kind of a rough estimate, but I do want to go episode by episode, and I do kind of expect to be wrong or off by an episode or two, but I think it's important to do this list now so I can compare it to where we actually are at the end of the season. So first, I want to remind you guys that you can follow me on Twitter to keep up with me on there, and of course, hit that subscribe button and bell icon so you don't miss out on any of these new uploads. Before we go over the first few episodes and plan out where it's heading from here, I'm very happy to finally bring you guys a word from this video's sponsor, Crunchyroll. For those who don't know, Crunchyroll is the central hub for everything anime and manga on the internet. You've definitely heard of them, perhaps for hosting a ton of amazing manga in high quality, or for streaming great anime like Demon Slayer or My Hero Academia, but they've also recently gotten into actually getting anime created, like how they had a hand in the creation of God of High School or Tower of God, which are both Crunchyroll originals. Well, now they're partnering with me to make sure that every one of my subs and fans has access to anime and manga on demand, and here's how. Go to crunchyroll.com/pineapple or just click the link in my description to get a 14-day free trial of Crunchyroll Premium. Premium lets you watch anime with no ads, which will save you time as you comb through over 1,000 different titles in the Crunchyroll library, with more being added constantly, just like Jujutsu Kaisen, which is definitely going to be in the running for anime of the season when some of the craziness that's coming finally gets adapted. Jujutsu Kaisen is just one of the anime that you can discover on Crunchyroll, so I'm honestly really happy to make all of that accessible to you all with just one click. And of course, when you watch on Crunchyroll, you're actually supporting the original creators through an official channel. So go to crunchyroll.com/pineapple to start your 14-day free premium trial now. And of course, thanks again to Crunchyroll for sponsoring the video. Now, with all of that said, hit it! Alright, so if you've been following this channel through my slow journey over the last few months, I've been trying to get you guys ready for Jujutsu Kaisen, and now the anime is finally here. Things are already moving along quickly as we're just about to see Megumi and Sukuna go off, and by the way, let's just take a second here to talk about pronunciations, right? Like, I've always said Sukuna when I read the manga, but I know some people pronounce it Sukuna, some people pronounce it a little differently. When you're reading a manga, you talk to your friends and whatever, you're not really worrying about pronunciations, but obviously because I'm a content creator and I have to talk to you guys about it, there's a certain way that I'm sure you guys want me to pronounce it, and generally I don't really care about how people feel about my pronunciations, but I feel like this one is kind of like a big deal, you know what I mean? So Sukuna, Sukuna, which one should I go with? Because I'm pretty comfortable going with Sukuna, but I feel like that's also just kind of part of my whole New York, New Jersey / accent, just wanting to go with the easy route, right? I don't know. So anyway, like I was saying, next episode should cover Megumi and Sukuna's face-off in a battle that I'm sure Mappa's gonna snap on since they've already done great so far this season. I've really liked the adaptation so far, and part of trying to figure out where exactly the season is gonna end is definitely looking at the pace of the episodes that are already out. At the time of uploading this video, we currently have 4 episodes out. As usual with the first episode of an anime like this, they only covered the first chapter of the manga, going from Yuji's introduction to Megumi fighting the curse in Yuji's high school, and Yuji of course eating the cursed finger and becoming host to the King of Curses, Sukuna. Now, of course, episode 1 was a standout episode since the studio obviously has to make a great first impression on any first-time watchers to get them hooked, and from the reaction that I saw on Twitter, it definitely worked. They nailed the whole vibe that you get from reading the manga, and every character just felt like they were being represented correctly. I definitely say my favorite bits of the episode were the impact frames for Megumi's divine dogs, and the very final scene where Yuji struggles against the curse and starts running and jumping all over it and breaking its arms and stuff. But of course, I can't mention the first episode without also praising that amazing opening, which had me dancing and all hyped up as soon as the episode started. And of course went viral for various reasons, one namely being a parkouring panda that we'll hopefully be seeing by the end of next episode. Moving on to episode 2, we find ourselves with a pace of about 2 chapters, as the episode covers chapters 2 and 3. About 2 chapters of content per episode of slight variations here and there is usually a sign of a good pace, but I guess it works on a case-by-case basis at times. With Jujutsu Kaisen, we start off episode 2 strong with Gojo versus Sukuna, and of course First, in this episode, we learn a lot about the world that Yuji is going to be stepping into as a Jujutsu sorcerer through his interactions with Gojo and Masamichi. Yuji learns that all Jujutsu sorcerers die with regrets, and his motivation is then called into question when he considers the real reason why he wants to move forward and continue fighting curses, which is partially because Yuji is the only one who can consume Sukuna's body parts without dying. So if he just lives a normal life knowing that, then he's kind of responsible for the ones who get hurt and die in his place. He has a purpose that he has to fulfill because it's what he can do. I definitely want you to keep in mind how interesting it's going to be to watch Yuji grow and question his own decisions and ideals as the story goes on. Now with episode 3, we're introduced to the third first year at Jujutsu High, Kugisaki Nobara. Episode 3 covers chapters 4 and 5, so it sticks with that 2-chapter pace that I'm a big fan of, and it ends on the introduction of the first cursed womb in our story, but more on that in a minute. I'm definitely a big fan of how the anime adds in loads of detail and extra content to try and enhance the story that's being told, like how the anime gave us parts of Nobara's backstory, which was just very relevant in the manga. Nobara and Yuji work together to take down a curse, with Nobara eventually using her resonance ability, which lets her use her straw doll to do damage to an enemy that she has a piece of. With that, we come to the most recent episode, episode 4. This episode actually covers chapters 6, 7, and a majority of 8, which brings us to almost 3 full chapters of content. The story this time revolves around our trio of Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi heading headfirst into their first full team mission. They're on the scene to confirm the nature of the curse that's born from something called a cursed womb. But what exactly is that? Well, cursed wombs are created when a cursed object like Sukuna's finger draws in cursed energy from the area around it and uses that energy to create a new cursed spirit born from all of that coagulating power. We saw in this episode, but it literally looks like a monster is sitting still within a sack, growing into a curse, while those who have the energy to see it look on in horror. When our team gets on the scene, they split up, with Nobara falling through the floor on her own and Yuji and Megumi trying to plan their next move before a special grade cursed spirit appears before them. Now, special grade curses are no joke. They're the most powerful classification of curse, and Yuji and Megumi stand no chance against it, leading to an episode that covers Yuji's struggle against the curse, as well as Sukuna's absolute bullying of the creature once he's summoned by Yuji near the end of the episode. I genuinely love how Sukuna wants to do anything to be a pain in Yuji's side and make things less convenient for him, because obviously I'm sure we're all used to powers like this that just bow to their user, but not here. Sukuna is a piece of work, and he definitely has no problems ruining Yuji's entire life, so be on the lookout for him to try and find other ways to troll Yuji. So now that we've covered the episodes that are out already, let's start moving into stuff that we haven't seen yet. One major way that Sukuna is going to try to troll Yuji is in episode 5, which like I said is going to feature Megumi versus Sukuna, as Megumi takes it upon himself to end Yuji's life and keep him from being a danger to others, while Sukuna of course comes up with a plan for how he can beat Megumi without allowing Yuji to ever switch his body back to normal. I think this episode is going to cover chapters 8, 9, and parts of 10, because while I do think Mappa is going to go crazy with the Sukuna and Megumi fight, I do expect us to get at least half of the Geto introduction scene in this episode, with the episode ending on Geto detailing his plans for Gojo and Sukuna, or even better, the very end of chapter 10, where Yuji and Sukuna are face to face for their first confrontation. Also, like I said previously, I think this might be the first episode where we really get a good look at Panda. In episode 6, I think we're going to keep up that 3-chapter pace, with the episode covering the events of chapter 10 all the way to the end of chapter 13. This is going to involve a bunch of character introductions if episode 5 doesn't get them out of the way already, but part of this episode will feature Yuji's cursed energy training, with the episode likely ending on the Jogo and Gojo highway scene. This sets up episode 7 to pretty much entirely revolve around Gojo versus Jogo, which is a fight that manga readers have been dying to see animated, because we know that it's going to be absolutely crazy, especially with this team behind it. I'm actually conflicted on how much I think that episode's going to cover, because I think that the best place to end the episode would be on Mahito's introduction, but that would mean that the episode has to cover the end of 13 all the way to early in chapter 16, putting it at nearly 3.5 chapters of content to cover. But with a chunk of the episode likely going to Gojo versus Jogo, and the way that fights tend to blow through pages in the source material quickly, I settled on the thought that this episode would either end on Mahito's introduction, or at the very least it'll end on Geto and Hanami thinking about whether or not they'll step in after Gojo and Jogo's battle. Now with that pace in mind, I think episode 8 is going to cover the introduction of Todo and Mai, with part of the episode giving Todo and Megumi's fight a spotlight, likely ending on the 1-month time skip to September 2018, where a group of high schoolers has been found deformed in a theater, attacked by an unknown source. This means I think it'll end at the ending of chapter 19, meaning this episode might even give us our first in-episode peek at Junpei, the character that we see at the end of the first opening. But more importantly, we may even get our first look at Nanami here, who of course is a fan-favorite sorcerer that I know a lot of you have been dying to see in action. From here, I think episode 10 is going to cover chapters 20 to 23, with most of that covering Nanami and Mahito's fight, and also including Yuji and Junpei's first meeting. In my opinion, that episode is likely going to end on Nanami making the rubble fall, with episode 11 beginning on Yuji looking for Ijichi as Junpei's mom finds the two of them hanging out together. From there, I think the rest of episode 11 is going to cover right to the end of chapter 25, bringing this episode's pace to 2 chapters, which is more like the first few episodes that we've already seen. With Mahito's grand stage set at the school, I think episode 12, or the halfway point of the season, is going to be one that a lot have been waiting for. This episode should feature Junpei and Yuji at the school, as well as Mahito and Yuji's first meeting. I'm conflicted on where the episode is going to end, because on one hand it could end on Yuji's infamous "I'll kill you" line so that the meme of the jazzy ending song playing after such a depressing moment can actually come true, but I also think that it's possible that they could return to a 3-chapter pace of this episode and end it on Nanami joining the fight at the end of chapter 28. For episode 13, of course, I think we'll see the rest of Nanami and Yuji versus Mahito, which means this episode is where we'll probably see Self-Embodiment of Perfection, which I'm really excited to see animated because MAPPA is seemingly making the domains way more of a visual treat in the anime. I think this episode is going to end on Mahito wondering if he can kill Yuji's spirit one more time, which is right in the middle of chapter 31, so we're sticking with that almost 3-chapter pace here. For episode 14, I think we'll start off with Yuji recovering from the battle against Mahito, and this episode should mostly cover the end of the versus Mahito arc as we move on to the Goodwill arc. This episode should feature the second years and our first year Jujutsu sorcerers as they meet up with Kyoto's team, and we should even get a good look at Yuta and Rika from the Jujutsu Kaisen prequel manga in this episode, since he does get mentioned. Either way, I have that episode ending at the end of chapter 33, with Yuji leading the team to quote-unquote go and win this, and Maki pushing him over with her boot. Episode 15 should pick up on the team battles actually taking place, and this is where we're likely to see Todo going straight for our team as he and Yuji start their battle, and Todo sees a strange memory, which is definitely something that I think we need to talk about a little more on this channel at some point. But anyway, I think because of all of the action that's packed in these couple of chapters, that this episode will end on Todo asking Yuji if he's okay with being weak, which happens at the end of chapter 36, making this another 3-count episode. You know, at this point I'm actually realizing how long it can take to go through every single episode like this, so let's speed it up a little. I think episode 16 is going to cover Yuji and Todo's sparring session even further, but the main focus should be Panda versus Mekamaru, with the episode likely covering up until the end of chapter 39 as that battle ends. Episode 17 should pick up on Maki and Kasumi's fight, and it should be a pretty packed episode, as I also think it'll cover Nobara versus Momo and Maki versus Mai, meaning I think it'll cover from the end of chapter 39 to the end of chapter 42. This sets the stage for episode 19 to be a long battle for our sorcerers, as I think it'll start off with Megumi versus Noritoshi, and then end somewhere in the middle of Hanami's fight against our team, with a good place to end in my opinion being near the beginning of chapter 45 when the curtain gets placed around the Goodwill arena. This brings us to episode 19, which is a number that a lot of people are infatuated with ever since the response to Demon Slayer episode 19. I already see a lot of people wondering if Jujutsu Kaisen is going to see a similar blow up to Demon Slayer, and I personally think there are multiple amazing and likely viral fights on this list of episodes already, but because people are definitely going to compare this episode just because the actual episode number, what can we expect? Well, if we're still right about the pace of the season and we've managed to keep it up until episode 19, then that means this episode should start on chapter 45 and continue all the way to the point where Yuji and Todo arrive to face Hanami together at the end of chapter 47. This sets up episode 20 to be the first appearance of Black Flash, probably at the half point of the episode, and from there I think episode 20 is going to feature Todo and Yuji's team assault on Hanami, covering all the way until chapter 50, with Todo's Boogie Woogie in full effect and Hanami getting multiple tastes of Black Flash. The next episode, episode 21, should pretty much wrap up the combat section of the Goodwill arc, with Gojo obviously doing what Gojo does best, and us finally getting to see purple in the anime, with the episode likely ending on Mahito claiming victory over his mission to steal the cursed wombs and Sakuna fingers held at Jujutsu High right at the end of chapter 52. From here I have episode 22 covering the aftermath of the battle as both teams of curses and sorcerers take inventory of what they gained and lost, and we finally get to wind down and have some wholesome fun with the Goodwill baseball game. I think MAPPA is definitely going to have fun with the baseball game's animation and give us a few fun scenes that we aren't expecting, with this episode ending at the end of chapter 54. I know a lot of people are expecting next season to be the start of the Origin of Obedience arc, but depending on the pace, it is very possible, although unlikely, that either the final 2 episodes of this season or the final episode touch on the very beginning of that arc. What we could see is episode 23 showing us Mahito's planning on doing with what he stole, and ending on the end of chapter 56, with Megumi and the team finding the cursed spirit that they're there to hunt down under the bridge. This means the final episode could actually leave us on the cliffhanger of Megumi having to fight the same exact kind of curse that he ran away from in episode 4, which would mean next season might even start out with Chimera Shadow Garden, which would be an insane way to kick things off for season 2, but I think that's going a little too far for this video. What's more likely, to be honest, is that 1 or 2 of the episodes in the earlier side of this list covers 1 less chapter than I expected them to, meaning the season could actually end on the baseball game, with maybe the very first few scenes of the Origin of Obedience arc being given to us to tease the next season. But regardless, at or around the very beginning of that arc is where I expect this season to end, with next season hopefully on the horizon, since I think Mappa is definitely going to want to come back for a round 2. So that's my rough estimate for where I think Jujutsu Kaisen season 1 is going to end, and if you want to read the manga and catch up from there after the season's over, you're likely going to want to start reading from chapter 54-ish, so keep that in mind and enjoy reading when that time comes. I want to say thank you again to Crunchyroll for sponsoring this video, and to my subs and anyone here, watch out, because I've definitely got more Jujutsu Kaisen content coming, including the second part of the story of Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 0, as well as weekly reviews for the anime. So be here for that, and make sure you're watching the anime by clicking the link in my description and trying out that Crunchyroll free trial at crunchyroll.com/pineapple. Definitely don't miss out on next week's episode, because again, I think it's going to be a big one, and this is Pineapple. I love you guys. I'll see you later. Peace.